All right, let's finish up chapter 4. Talk about goal setting and objective setting. The goal setting theory is this. A goal has a time horizon of more than 1 year, and an objective has a time horizon of less than a year. So there's the distinction between goals and objectives. Generally, a goal is going to be something long-term, longer than a year. An objective is going to be more of a short-term sort of thing. Goals and objectives have a significant effect on performance if they have some of these attributes. First off, clarity. Clarity is the single most important element in setting goals. Goals and objectives must be specific so that they can be measured. So there has to be some sort of criteria by which it can be measured in an objective sort of way whether or not the goal or objective has been met. And that needs to be clear. What is the metric? What is the criteria for whether that has been successful or not? Increasing the difficulty of goals and objectives generally amplifies the challenge, which in turn raises the effort to meet the challenge. So if you've set a goal or an objective for yourself and you find that you're quickly achieving that, then perhaps the goal or the objective was set a little too low. Increase it. Challenge yourself a little bit more. Because goals have a long-term horizon, it's useful to set goals and the expectations for those goals high, because you have a much longer period of time in which to be able to achieve that particular goal. Short-term objectives should be set to make people feel like winners, a deep-seated need for many of us. We like to feel like we're accomplishing something, that we're moving forward in some way or fashion. So, in a way, you can think of it as meeting objectives are ways to give yourself little victories. But those objectives should move yourself closer and closer to a larger goal. The best objectives are moderately difficult, yet they provide a challenge because they are perceived as attainable, and because of that, they're motivating. Here's a good example. Those of you that may perhaps have had certain health goals, such as maybe losing weight. If you say to yourself, I'm going to lose 100 pounds, that's a big, lofty goal. And that's something that can take a significant amount of time. But if that's all you do is say, I'm going to lose 100 pounds, that can become overwhelming and provide someone with a sense of, I don't even know where to start. And very quickly, the desire to reach that goal can wane down to nothing. But if you set certain objectives and certain markers to say, okay, in the first month, I'm going to not even worry about losing weight. I'm going to focus on eating in a healthier sort of way, or I'm going to focus on an exercise regime and do that. Then perhaps you can set a small weight loss goal. In the next month, you're going to lose 5 pounds or 10 pounds or whatever the case may be. And those sorts of things, while challenging to a certain degree because it requires a certain amount of discipline in order to get those things done, once you realize that goal, then realize that objective rather, it becomes something to celebrate and then give you the opportunity to set another marker for yourself as you inch your way closer and closer to the overall goal that you have set. You need to get feedback, a reading on how you are doing. You receive feedback from yourself by successfully solving problems and closing sales, by analyzing what you did right, or by failing and analyzing what you did wrong. It's not a time to beat yourself up. It's a time to make rather clear assessments and to look at what you did well, what areas you can improve, what sort of things may need to change if perhaps there's an outside force that you can't really control. Find a way to work around that or change your trajectory altogether. Furthermore, you should get feedback on your objectives and goals from your manager on a regular basis. You have the right to know how you're doing, what your manager thinks you can do to improve. And try not to take criticism in such a way that someone is talking down to you. Even if that may be what the person is doing, take it as an opportunity to really get a fair assessment of what others are perceiving in terms of your performance, especially someone that would be in a supervisory position to you. And think about ways that you can change what you're doing in order to improve from their perspective. Now, MADCUD, here's another mnemonic for you, MADCUD. This is an objective setting practice. So this is very similar to those of you that may have learned about SMART goals. This is kind of a different take on that. They're very similar, but a couple distinctions here. First off, M. M in MADCUD is measurable. It's more productive to set a series of specific, measurable, smaller objectives that will help you reach a desired monthly revenue level, as opposed to setting a revenue goal in and of itself. So again, it's taking that big picture sort of thing, the overarching thing that you want to do, and give yourself checkpoints and say that you're going to do a certain thing by a certain time that inches you towards that overreaching, over-encompassing goal. A is attainable. If objectives are reasonable, challenging, and attainable, they're going to be motivating. So you want the objective that you set to, be somewhat of a challenge, not going to be an absolute gimme, but it's also something that realistically can be achieved by virtue of putting that discipline into place. D is demanding. An objective has to be not only attainable, but also sufficiently demanding in order to be challenging. It requires that you put conscious effort into making that achievement, because it is something that stretches us. It makes us improve on our abilities and our skills. C, consistent with company goals. Individual objectives should complement company objectives. The things that we do when we work for a company ought to be in harmony with the vision and the mission and the goals of the company. U, under the control of the individual. Control how hard you work and your activities. Increasing revenue is not always under the salesperson's control. So, if you're setting goals of reaching a certain amount of revenue, you may not have complete control over that. You can put a lot of effort into it, but maybe the better goal to have is to increase the number of calls that you make on clients, or to learn more about a certain industry, or have a goal of trying to get a certain percentage of the calls that you make turn into presentations, and a certain amount of the presentations that you make turn into sales. Those things are a little more within the control of the person that's setting those goals. And then the second D stands for deadline. Goals and objectives must have a due date. Without those clear deadlines, we're very much the type of people that if we have the opportunity to put something off, it's going to be very tempting to do. But if we have a deadline in place that we want to achieve X by this date and this time, that in itself can be a great motivator. Now, with that in mind, you also want to keep your objectives flexible. If they're carved in stone, if they're unchangeable, your objectives can lose their motivating effect. So that doesn't mean to not take an objective seriously. If you've set a deadline for something, or you've set a criteria in order for that objective to be met, you should do your best to strive to achieve that. But, like we talked about before, sometimes if we set the bar too low, and we make that achievement early on in the process, well, maybe we flex in setting the criteria a little higher. Or if we're running into difficulties, we be a little more realistic and set the bar a little bit lower. Because we want things to be attainable. We want to see achievement. We want to succeed on some level. If we don't see a chance for succeeding, it's going to defeat us and prevent us from even trying to move forward. Take full responsibility for your cycle of success. The cycle of success is an ongoing cycle of ever more demanding objectives and goals that lead to ever increasing sales. Check out the figure in your textbook for a little bit more information there. The elements of the cycle of success are attitude, objectives, motivation, and performance. The cycle should be your cycle. It's something you own, that you take full responsibility for. What's your attitude? How are you keeping yourself in such a way of having a positive outlook on things? The objectives you set, do they meet the Mad Cud requirements? Are they attainable? Are they realistic? Do you have a deadline to kind of motivate you in those things? Speaking of motivation, do you really have the drive and the desire to reach out and achieve the objective that you set? And if you do that, it's going to drive you to have a certain amount of performance, which increases your ability and your competency and those sorts of things. And if you achieve all of that, it's going to increase your attitude that much more, and you're back at it and you continue on in this cycle. It's your dream. It's your mission. And here's something that may help you. Write out a personal mission based on your dream. Put it in your wallet or your purse, somewhere where you're going to see it on a regular basis. I know people that have done things like this and stuck it on the mirror in their bathroom, or taped it to the steering wheel in their car. Somewhere where you're going to encounter this thing on a regular basis. Let it help you drive your cycle of success and realize your dream. Sometimes just looking at something on a regular basis gives us enough of a reminder and enough of a cue in our minds to help us to give a little more push, a little more effort, invest a little more time, whatever it is that is necessary in us for the ability to be able to achieve the objectives that we set for ourselves. And that's going to do it. That's chapter 4. We're going to talk about some of these things as it comes to the AESKOPP model. We're going to talk about keeping your attitude up and your abilities of self-esteem, self-confidence, what it is to motivate yourself. We'll talk about these things in class. You may have some tips and ideas that have helped you in the grand scheme of life, and maybe those things would carry over into a sales sort of environment. Think about those things. Bring those ideas with you when you come to class.